And I was on Northern Africa, so let me explain some things there in history just to clean it up a little bit. And I'm talking about with regard to Africa. So in about 202 BC, a Roman general, Scipio Africanus, European, defeated Hannibal, a Moor, copper color, dark skin, defeated Hannibal at Carthage in the Battle of Zama. Now, Carthage was located near the northern tip of modern day Tunisia, and is located between Algeria and Libya. So you got to get that African, continental Africa as you understand it, map, and look at that around the northern part. Now, with the Roman victory, the northern part of the continent, just that part, was then called Africa, and later the entire continent was referred to as Africa. However, today, most of the nations in Africa have other names that they refer to the continent as. I just think that's important to say. As a matter of fact, in ancient times, the continent Africa, like you see on the map at what's identified as Africa, it was referred to as, or actually called Alkebulan, later Tamiri, and then Kemet or Kemet. Corfu was another name. Amonis, Ortygia, Ethiopia, Libya, Oceania, etc. I just want to point that out, that a lot of things we do, we kind of fall in line with a culture that's not yours, with names that aren't yours. And we adapt those names and consider that to be what it is.
In 1,000 feet, merge onto I-57
So we were
South.
talking on the previous show, and I just want to bring everybody up to space, and let me just jump into it. What about these Asiatic people, these so-called black, the so-called African American? Well, the statement that I want to make and that I got to prove and give some history in a given time is the land that you stand on, again, in the U.S.
Continue on I-57 South for 105 miles.
In the present day, America is actually Morocco, Africa. And it was owned, or not owned, but in the responsibility of the Sultan of Morocco. And the rightful heirs to that land are the descendants of the copper-colored people, are the descendants of the ancient Moabite tribe that traversed from Hikupta, you call it Egypt, into the America. And those heirs of that land are the Asiatic people. That is the so-called Negro, or the so-called people of color, or the so-called black people. And we are the rightful heirs of the land, and the rightful name of those people, believe it or not, are Moors. And who are the rightful heirs to this largest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world? Where is this largest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world? The so-called black people are the heirs, but the largest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world is what you call today America. And just doing a little more recapping. I know that sounds like nothing the majority of people have ever heard before, but it's true. And you got to be patient with me as I prove my statement of fact. Now, while I'm letting my hair down with nothing but raw truth, let me share this. Again, the Sultan of Morocco and the so-called founding fathers agreed to work together to cultivate the land and do so in religious harmony. But sadly, the Sultan agreed to betray, conquer, subdue, and loan his people the fellow Moors, and in Northwest Africa. You say Northwest Africa? Well, that was the name on the land that we're standing today. Got the old maps to prove it. Let me give you some other names. Northwest Africa. Northwest Amexem. Of course, North America. You know that one. How about the North Gate? That's the celestial zodiac reference, the North Gate. How about Turtle Island? Next time you look at the map of North America and step back and look at Alaska as the head of the turtle, my, Turtle Island. It was also called Old Amexem Almac. It was also called Al Moroccans. And today you call it America. Now here was the deal. The plan was to enslave the Aboriginals so they could help cultivate the land and build the physical infrastructure of a nation that would enrich many relatively quickly, including the Sultan's estate and the Sultan's affiliated nobles. Now, I can't present that truth without making a few things clear. Again, the Moors in Northern African region were master slave traders. The Moors were not some small group of modern day Arab looking, bear with me there, gotta reach you connotatively. They weren't some Arab looking people that occupied Western Asia, or what folk call today the Middle East. Actually, the Middle East is Western Asia, but I digress. So, again, with the Moors who brought this organized sewer system and oil street lamps to Europe and all the other things we talked about in technology that they brought that wasn't there before them, these copper-colored people, they built the greatest universities in that region of the world. They circumnavigated the globe, via maritime travel. That's ocean or sea travel. They brought maps of the rest of the world to Europe. The Moors dominated the Europe region nearly 800 years until they were defeated and overthrown. Their last standing battle was the Alhambra. And in short, there was something that took place called the Spanish Inquisition. And you got to dig and get around that and look through the code words as you're reading. But ultimately, this Spanish Inquisition was the extracting of people from Europe that refused to proclaim Christianity as their religion. These people that were extracted or removed, kicked out, and exiled from Europe were mostly Muslim and Yehudi, or Ibra, or you call it Hebrew. You know them more directly as Jews. But those Jews were Moors, dark-skinned, copper-color people. Now, I know you're saying, wait, truth, there you go. There you go, truth. You're at it again. Well, I know you're thinking. I got it in my mind what you're saying. You're saying Hebrews are Jews and Jews are European. Most of you say white. So I got to touch something again, or we're not going to make it through if you're just jumping in the show. And so those of you who heard this before, just bear with me. First of all, the word or the term Jew, believe it or not, is a Middle English translation from 1100 AD to 1500 AD. In the earlier show, we talked about decoding the etymon. When you look up words in a dictionary or in an abridged dictionary, you see this information in a bracket. And inside the bracket is the etymon. And the etymon gives you the history of the word. The etymon gives you the word origin, of course, the root word. The etymon gives you the original language. And then when you identify the original language, and because the culture is in the language, the etymon gives you how the word transferred from language to language to language, when the word became introduced to another language, gives you the years and the time. And with that, you can do some really, really deep affirmation or debunking of what's true and what's not. So I know what your Bible says. The Bible is right. You know my position. Translations may be flawed. But remember the time of the translation, and that Jew word is in there, translated into the Old English. Same thing with the Torah, same thing with the Quran. Now, according to many great scholars like Sheikh Anta Diop or Dr. John Henrik Clarke or Dr. Ivan Gladstone Van Sertima, oh man, and Dr. Joseph Alfredo Antonio Ben Jahakman, the European Jew of today are not of the direct bloodline of the Hebrew Bible or the Torah or the Quran. However, some of the Moors involved in the 711 AD European transition, they were, as a matter of fact, those scholars contend that the modern day Jew, again, is European in ethnicity and appears in history around 800 AD. And actually, they're called the Ashkenazi Jew. They ultimately adopted and embraced a powerful culture and a religion of the original Hebrew people, who were dark-skinned people, unlike the Ashkenazi Jew. And the Ashkenazi Jew settled in Russia, Germany, Poland, Australia, Czechoslovakia, and other countries in that region. The big picture, honestly, this entire narrative is about the human race. But because of the abundance of misinformation associated with skin color, I feel compelled to just press this topic just a bit. So to my more mature and scholarly audience, please bear with me. Okay, back to the old dictionary and applying the correct meaning of words used in that period to actually describe those times in history. We defined earlier what a Moor was, that it was a noun, and there are many spellings, M-O-O-R, Danish, M-O-H-R, German, M-A-U-R-E, French. The Greek just said, look, these folk are dark, obscure, and mysterious people. The dictionary defines them as a native of the northern coast of Africa, called by the Romans from the color of their skin, of course, Mauritania, the country of dark complexioned people. The same country now called Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, etc. So I just want to do this so folk can please stop referring like they try to teach us that in school, that when you say Moor, you're only looking at the olive color skin or light skin, or some say tawny people of complexion, that the majority of people that currently occupy northern Africa and Western Asia today. The lighter hue Moors obviously existed, but they became more pronounced later in that region, later in history. So I just want to give that foreground. So again, imagine this area, and this area is being absolutely dominated, revitalized, and brought to life. The Moors built bathhouses, had over 600 libraries, bringing an education and enlightening not only the world, but that particularly right now, we're talking about that region. So we talked about how they enslaved, and the word slaved and the etymon for Slovenia, and the people of Slovenia were called slaves. These are European people. that were enslaved by the Moors, but it turns out the Moors had enslaved many, many people, and certainly the European people of that region over time. So what happens? You get into a situation where we made a statement earlier that the so-called Asiatic people, the Moors, the Native American, not Indian, I'm not talking about them, they may be indigenous, but not aboriginal, are the heirs to the greatest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world. So there was an agreement between the Sultan of Morocco, and the Sultan of Morocco allowed his minions, frankly, to be used to cultivate the land. Now, we left off actually with the Revolutionary War and how these folk that were kicked out of Europe, some, and remember, there were folk that were already there, but there were nobles in North, what you call North America. I'm calling it Al Morocco. That's the name, but present day America. So at 1492, Columbus didn't just sail the ocean blue. That 1492 represents the fall of the Moors in the European region. And that fall was a big one. And ultimately, a trade route that existed with the land that we're on now, the present day America, that was called Morocco, the Empire of Morocco, not necessarily the kingdom, which is in the modern day continental Africa. This trade route already existed. The Europeans just hadn't been made privy to it. With the fall of the Moors, they literally brought the Europeans, Christopher Columbus and others, to the Americas. And therein lies a monstrous issue. So, with this agreement between the Sultan and then first it was we're talking about the king. They were cultivating the land. They had enslaved the people. And man, this thing was moving. And we talked about the people that were colonized or brought to create colonies in the Americas. How they were angry and frustrated because old King George, I believe that's the second, was taxing the people wickedly. And the Moors, the European people that were there, they wanted to succinct. They wanted to pull away from Great Britain. And the nobles, those are the Moors, they said, man, you just can't pull away, guys. You have to write something, a document, a writ, a legal thing for the world to see what oppression you're under and why you are pulling away from an agreement with the king. And that is the Declaration of Independence. And that started the Revolutionary War. But before the war took place, there was an Article of Association. These are agreements of how the colonies would operate, giving respect to the heirs or the empire